Trapped beneath the earth. A tale of survival in the deep. Opening slow, ominous. Imagine being trapped in absolute darkness, hundreds of meters beneath the surface, where one wrong breath could be your last. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of what happened when experienced divers descended into hell itself. Part 1. The Dive into Darkness. Building Tension. February 6, 2014. 5 men stood at the edge of frozen water in Norway, staring down at their entry point into Plura Cave. They were about to attempt something few had ever done, and even fewer had survived. Among them was Kai Kankanrinta, a 46-year-old Finnish diver who knew death intimately. Just 1 year earlier, he'd watched his closest friend die during a dive in Finland. Most people would never go near water again. But Kai, he came back for more. Let that sink in. Joining him were 4 elite divers. The best of the best. Men who had conquered caves across Europe. Patrick Grankvist, 42 years old. Jari Huhtari, 40. Jari Usamaki, 34. And Vesa Rantanen, just 33, the youngest. Their mission seemed straightforward. Enter through one submerged entrance, exit through another on the opposite side. Simple, right? Voice drops lower. Wrong. Plura Cave is the deepest known cave in northern Europe. A labyrinth of flooded tunnels descending over 130 meters into pitch-black, freezing water. The route between the 2 entrances? Barely mapped. Barely explored. One mistake, one torn suit, one moment of panic, and you die. Slowly. Freezing. Alone in the dark. The descent begins. Tension building. They cut a triangular hole through the ice. The first 2 divers, Jari Huhtari and Patrick Grankvist, disappeared into the black water, propelled by underwater scooters. 2 hours later, the remaining 3 followed. At first, everything went perfectly. Too perfectly. They descended 34 meters, traveled 500 meters into the cave, and reached an air-filled chamber. A brief moment to breathe, to rest. For just a moment, they thought this might actually work. Shift to darker tone. That's when the cave decided to fight back. The nightmare begins. Slow, deliberate. The passage narrowed. Twisting. Barely wide enough for a fully equipped diver to squeeze through. At this depth, there was no turning back. Patrick went first. Then, Jari Huhtari's flashlight went dark. Then it started flashing. Rapidly. Desperately. The universal signal for, I'm in trouble. Patrick turned around, and his heart sank. Jari was trapped. His bailout cylinder snagged on the cave wall. And he was panicking. In cave diving, panic is a death sentence. Voice becomes more urgent. Patrick released his scooter. Swam back. Pushed the cylinder forward just enough to free Jari. It worked. But when Patrick looked again, voice becomes haunting. Yari's regulator was out of his mouth. Patrick forced it back in. Too late. Yari's lungs were already flooded. His friend was dead. Long pause. And Patrick? He couldn't even scream. The choice. Somber, heavy. Patrick checked his dive computer. 400 minutes of decompression time. What was supposed to be a 5-hour dive had just become 9 hours, and every second he stayed made it worse. He had 2 choices. Stay with his friend's body and die, or leave him and maybe survive. He chose survival. Patrick turned away from Yari's corpse and swam toward the exit, alone. What he didn't know, voice drops to near whisper, was that the second team was swimming straight toward the body. The second team's horror, building dread. 2 hours after the first group, the remaining 3 divers began their descent. Vesa Rantanen in the lead, followed by Jari Usamaki and Kai Kankanrinta. As Vesa approached the narrow passage, he heard something. A distress signal, echoing through the water. He followed the sound, and then he saw it. Voice becomes chilling. A body, blocking the entire tunnel. Jari Huhtari's lifeless form, floating in the passage, staring at nothing. There was no room to turn around. No way to go back without risking 12 hours underwater. To survive, Vesa had to swim past a corpse. Let that image settle. Moments later, Jari Usamaki reached the same site. And he broke. Panic consumed him. His breathing spiraled out of control. Kai tried desperately to calm him down, but it was too late. The cave claimed its second victim. 3 men. 3 different directions, each alone. Mysterious, almost haunting. Kai rushed forward to warn Vesa, only to find him violently kicking, desperately trying to force his way past the body. Kai begged him to stop, to turn back. Vesa refused, believing everyone was about to die. Kai made a choice. He retreated, alone. Now, something impossible happened. Against all odds, Vesa squeezed past the body. 3 men were now swimming alone in the darkness. Each one, convinced he was the only survivor. Build suspense. Patrick and Vesa swam toward the second exit. Kai fought his way back toward the entrance. After 8.5 hours underwater, Patrick broke the surface at 9 p.m. Vesa emerged an hour later. On the opposite side of the cave, Kai punched through thin ice at 1:30 in the morning. He dragged himself into their van, shivering, exhausted, alone. He waited. At 2 a.m., headlights appeared. Patrick and Vesa, alive. The nightmare was over. Pa's voice shifts. But as terrifying as Plura Cave was, it wasn't the deepest, it wasn't the deadliest, and it wasn't the end of the story. Transition building mystery. Part 2, The Abyss. Voice becomes darker, more ominous. 4 years later, another team descended into something far worse. Not just a cave, the deepest cave on Earth. Let that sink in. Veryovkina Cave, hidden in the mountains of Abkhazia, plunging more than 2,200 meters straight down into the earth. To put that in perspective, fewer people have reached its bottom than have ever been to space. In September 2018, a team of Russian cavers returned to this abyss. Leading them was Pavel Demidov, a man who had already set the world depth record in this very cave months earlier. But this time they brought 2 outsiders. Robbie Schoen, a British cave photographer, and Jeff Wade, his assistant. Their mission: document the alien world below and collect biological samples. Shrimp and scorpions that survived in total darkness. Voice becomes heavier. Each caver carried over 30 kilograms of gear, wrapped in layers just to survive the near-freezing temperatures. The descent was brutal. It took 8 hours just to reach the first camp, 600 meters deep, and they had to go 4 times deeper than that. 6 underground camps, multiple days just to reach the bottom. After 4 days, they finally arrived at the deepest camp. For 6 days, everything went according to plan. Then, on day 7, Pa's voice becomes urgent. The flood. Rapid, intense. A roar. Deafening. Primal. Thousands of liters of water surged into the cave without warning. 2 team members who had already left sent an urgent message through the cable line. Get out. Now. The team below wasn't worried. Flood pulses were common. Usually brief. Pa's voice drops to grim realization. They were wrong. Water erupted from a nearby chasm. The camp began to disappear beneath the flood. By the time they realized the danger, the chamber was nearly submerged. Urgent, desperate, Robbie Schoen clipped into the rope, and he climbed. The water fought him with every move. Breathing became a battle. If he failed, everyone behind him would be trapped. Hours passed. Finally, he reached dry ground. Minutes later, Jeff Wade emerged, but there was no time to celebrate. The water was still rising. Hours later, they reached the 1,900-meter camp. 15 minutes after that, headlamps appeared in the darkness. The remaining Russian cavers. Alive. Voice softens, becomes reflective. After 20 hours, the water finally began to recede. 4 days later, they reached the surface. They had escaped a cave that nearly became their tomb. Final pause haunting. Some places on Earth were never meant to be explored. Some depths were never meant to be reached. And some survivors will never forget what waits in the darkness below.